Are we live, Carrie?
Says we're live, but I don't see
Oh,
any
okay.
there's no video.
And those, anyway, I don't see any video either. Hold
Yeah,
on.
there's no video.
Oh, there we are. We're now. Sorry about that, people. With this software, it takes anywhere from 8 seconds to 15 seconds after it says you're live to when you're actually live on YouTube. So we're there now. And anyway, welcome to Paranormal Pulse. This is our paranormal discussion. And it's Sunday afternoon in the States. And Dave is here from Scotland, as always, in the evening time. It's nighttime there. Is the sun down, Dave?
Yeah, it's getting it's still daylight, but it's starting to get down there now.
Okay. Well, on that note, how you doing, Dave? Welcome.
Doing great, Cordell, and once again, hello everybody, and hello to the audience or anyone who may view this or not.
Oh,
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Carrie. So how are you doing today?
Good.
And me and Carrie live in Utah, and we have snow. I woke up this morning with an inch of snow.
Serious? You got snow again? Have you?
I don't.
Yeah, it's been snowing off and on half the
Man.
morning.
Yeah.
It's not sticking to the roads, it's sticking to the grass and everything.
Right.
And it's melting pretty quick, but it just keeps snowing every few hours. So anyway, passion for the paranormal. Well, we know who
Curry.
that is.
Hey,
That's
Curry.
our, and I'm going to give a plug to Curry since he's on there. Hey, Curry. Curry is a member of Paranormal Pulse, the U.S. By the way, Dave is the director of Paranormal Pulse UK. But Curry runs his own talk show, Passion for the Paranormal. Great show, by the way. And I recommend everybody go check it out. And Bob is okay. Hey, Bob, that's great to hear. It's been a long, strange year, and I'm glad you're still doing good. But anyway, check out Curry's channel, guys.
Talks about all paranormal.
Yes, UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, hauntings, you name it. He talks about it. Cryptozoology. Yeah, so go check out Passion for the Paranormal. And guys, Dave, Carrie, I think one of these, if Curry has the time, he ought to join us here on YouTube, and we'll have a four-way with Curry.
Yeah.
I didn't think anybody was getting
Cordell.
Well, anyway, so we'll invite Curry on some episode, and we'll have an hour and a half discussion about all the stuff he's encountered with his passion for the paranormal, and he has some interesting stories and insights, and he's a member of our team, so there you go. I try to show all the chats, guys, so if you don't want your chat to be shown up here, probably better not say it then. But yes, I thank you, Curry. That was I think it was a good plug for you. Anyway, guys, so tonight, Dave and Carrie, we're gonna talk about, can entities, spirits, whatever you want to call them, come home with you? Or the whole concept of whether it's evil, good, neither, can come home. Now, the other side of this, because really when I first thought, well, let's talk about this, and Dave is actually the one that brought this topic up. I've always viewed it from the paranormal investigator's perspective, but I think this also bleeds into the non-paranormal investigators concept of this whole idea. And I really have no first place to start, guys. So what I thought I would do is just go around the room real quick. Dave, what's your concept of this? And do you think it's possible? And then I'll let Carrie speak, and then we'll get a little more in depth with it. Go ahead, Dave.
I think it depends on what you view this thing is. From a rational or scientific perspective, you could say, well, how could that happen? How could something which may or may not be there attach to you? But from a personal experience, I have had a heck of a lot of things happening in the houses that I've lived in, more so to the family, since we started investigating. So whether that was coincidence, but I would say I wouldn't believe it, but for some reason it seems to be happening.
Okay, good take. And before I let Carrie speak, hello, Kimberly. Thanks for joining us on this wonderful Utah Sunday afternoon. Okay, Carrie, what's your basic thoughts on this?
The paranormal scientific part of my brain is saying no, but personally, I have to say yes. I don't know if it's a case that something attaches to a person and goes home, or does it attach to a family, or does it attach where there's just a lot of energy, or is it already at the location and you just don't know it? It's not like the Hollywood horror films, but I have to say, yeah.
Okay, good take. My feeling is roughly the same as yours, guys. I've experienced some things. I've never experienced a lot in all these years. Just if I were to wrap it up in, say, I'll just pick arbitrarily 20 years, 15 years, maybe 3 months worth of stuff happening, maybe 4. Nothing extraordinary by any means, other than something was sleeping with me for about 6 weeks, kept crawling into bed with me, but that's another story. So I haven't experienced Dave's excuse me. But yeah, I feel the same way as you guys. I think the evidence, at least for us, is there. So why do you what kind of
I'm trying to get his attention.
Oh, go ahead.
Let me just ask you, why is that different?
No, it's different in the fact that I've had very little activity in 15 years, 3 months worth total out of 15 years.
Yeah, but you said the crawling into the beds.
Yeah, actually, I'm quite interested in that bit, Cordell. Who was crawling into your bed?
I know the story, but how is that any different than what we're talking about?
Oh, no, it isn't different. I'm just saying I said other than somebody crawling into bed with me. So the statement was, I consider myself very minor in what's happened to me, other than when something crawled into bed with me. But I know both of your stories, and there's been a lot of activity. And Dave, for example, in 2 weeks, I think you've had more activity than I have in 3 months in 15 years. So that's all I'm saying. I haven't really had a lot of what I would call a lot of activity at all, period. But Dave,
reading Curry's post.
Oh, yeah, Dave, why don't you give us an example that you're willing to share? Now, remember, for Carrie and Dave and me, only share what you want to. And it can be somebody else's story also, but it's up to you guys because it is a personal thing, right? So go ahead, Dave.
One area, I work in power. And when I was coming through the ranks many years ago, there was an operator who passed away. And he used to kind of one of the operator's rounds was he used to go around and check different things. And an operator was sent across, and he passed away. So an operator was sent across to a substation, high voltage, all this crackling, to carry on those inspections, because obviously this guy had passed away. And when he opened the door, there was this guy standing directly in front of him. He was standing with his face to the side, looking ahead at the circuit breakers and things that he used to inspect. And at the time we thought, well, did this guy somehow continue doing his inspections, even after he had passed away? Or was this just an image which had been stored there, and just kind of, which gets back to some of our previous debates about residual and all that stuff. But I just wonder, Coyle, right? I'll give some examples throughout the whole of this podcast. Is it so much that things follow you home, or does your perception change enough to identify these things? And I know we've had a discussion this, like, for example, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. If your EVPs, if you try to listen to an EVP for the first time, it's difficult to understand what you're listening for. But once you hear it, then you can usually hear others a lot more clearly. And I wonder if your perception somehow changes, so you are more, the sounds you hear, the things you see. Previously, you may have chalked it down to just, I don't know, environmental noise or something out the corner of your eye. But I think once you start investigating, I just wonder if your perception does change somewhat, and you do start to recognize patterns more. You do start to put two and two together a lot more and think, hang on a minute, this might not be just, you aren't so readily dismissible of things you see and hear. That's probably a question for you two. Do you think that could happen? Do you think your perception could change where you are more used and familiar to identifying these occurrences?
Before Carrie responds, so what you're saying, Dave, is
in a long way, yeah.
Maybe you already at your house had a spirit or entity there.
Possibly.
Now you're just recognizing it because of your experience investigating. Possibly. Okay, what do you think, Carrie?
I think what we've talked about before too is, I think you can go somewhere and your perception does change. But at the same time, if you're saying your perception is changing, you're opening up a little bit more, then what about those who have that opening from the day they're born and has this continually happening? So,
yeah.
And if it is something that's repeating, then we throw in, is it residual? But I will throw something in on that fact later when we talk a little bit about what's going on and why I still don't think it's a residual.
Well, and I'm probably on the same track as Carrie, because Dave, your story, if it's interesting, if something can come home with you, how can it be residual?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It does tend to, it suggests intelligence, or it suggests, I don't know, kind of wanting, needing. I honestly don't know. One of when I used to investigate in Scotland, and Bob was at this location. It was high up on a mountainside. It was an old kind of larger mansion, and until we used to investigate that nearly every weekend. We did it for about a year and a half, 2 years. And it was then that things would start happening in the house, or we'd notice more happening in the house, and it was predominantly more towards the family. We photographed something which I know you're aware of. You've seen it. This thing in the doorway behind my daughter. My daughter was dressed as a Ariel from Disney, we were taking a photograph, and there was this horrible thing in the doorway. We heard a horrible screaming coming from inside the house, and then I started putting audio out, and you would hear like walking and doors slamming, all sorts of things. My daughter, when she was 1 year old, she was screaming on the monitor, and we went in and we couldn't get in her bedroom, and everything was pushed against her bedroom door. Now she was in a cot, and she couldn't obviously get out. She was 1, unless she was, she could move things with her mind, which I doubt. But and she had, and that was all of our toys were pushed against the door. I think there was a chest of drawers was pushed against the door, and we just couldn't get into the bedroom. And we finally got in, and she was standing upright in this cot. I'm not sure what you call them in the States. Crib. Yeah. And she's had her hands on this crib, and she's kind of screaming, and my son, he used to say, well, the lady came down. And it's like, what do you mean? Oh, the lady, she came down. And I could never figure out what, but the two of them were visited all the time. And my wife, she was putting my son to bed. And as she was lying there with him, kind of while he was sleeping, and he, used to have to lie awake with them, and just until he fell asleep and slowly sneak away, she felt someone kind of start stroking her head, and so we had a lot of like kind of minor things, but some kind of major things, pushing everything against the door, scream like a banshee. It was terrifying. It was horrible.
So Dave, I take it you believe this was from an investigation?
No, I don't. That's the problem. All I'm saying is it could be coincidence, but it didn't start occurring until after we'd thoroughly investigated some locations in Scotland.
Okay.
So it may have been coincidence, Cordell, but it just seems, if you're saying that, can we take things home with us? Since I've started investigating, a lot of things have been occurring in the properties that I've lived in.
Okay.
Don't know why.
Okay, I'm going to give Carrie now a chance to speak on that. Go ahead, Carrie.
Well, yeah, Dave, you're saying emotions. Emotions are key to a lot of it. We perceive things emotionally. We feel things and that. I think in my case, it was just how it was. There was always someone going on. Like certain person would come every night in my room, do different things, and always end up looking over me in the bed. I'm not the only one to experience it. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail until we get to a point where I will. But also having certain people come to you, but then you go to a different house and stay there, and that shows up there. So is it tied to you? Or you can't really say at that point that it's a location if it's going different places. So, and I've got stories for that, but then there's also things that happen at home that similar to Dave's, but I got cases where I would have to say it does follow.
Well, guys, this brings up an interesting thing, because it's like us. Okay, if you take Paranormal Pulse, we do a lot of investigations. On a normal year, we do tons of investigating. If one day you and this is to both of you, one day you notice something, activity in the house, how would you ever clarify, and let's say you believe it was from an investigation, how would you ever know if you investigate every weekend, and nine out of 10 times are different locations, staggered? How would you ever know where it came from? Or
you couldn't, could you? When we used to investigate a lot in Wyoming, when I was across there, in one of the locations, there was we heard or we seen a little girl, like peeking around the corner of the top of the stairs. We heard her once run by, or we heard it could have been a small boy. I mean, could have been a boy or a girl. And I remember at the time is we stopped recording or seeing this thing at that location. But then I did have a few events at home where my son and my daughter saw this this little girl kind of keep running past them. Is that related? No idea. No idea. How do you tell if it's from that location? I have no idea, Cordell. You would have to be very specific, yeah? Very specific, and I don't know how we could do that.
Well, and so the same question to Carrie now, but I just want to add one thing to it. Let's throw a wrinkle in here because this can be good and bad, and it's also a very touchy issue with investigators. So, Carrie, the same question that Dave just responded to, but with the added, is it ever a good idea to investigate your own home? Which I think is an important. Well, no, I think it's an important question.
It's great.
Because ultimately, if you're an investigator, that has to go through your mind all the time. You have to think about it, going, "Oh, I wish I would have caught that." It's like the furniture moving, Dave, up against the door. Wouldn't it have been wonderful if you had a camera in there? You would have went like, "Oh, that," but it's your family. That's the problem. So, Carrie,
Yeah.
Carrie.
Sorry, Cordell. And it's normally the family who stop that. The amount of times I have tried and it's been nipped in the bud.
Well, I think it's a very important question that we should address because for everything we've gone through, there's that many more times 10 investigators that are going through the same situation. So, Carrie, go ahead.
What was your question? If we know what location it could come from?
Yeah, okay. So, question one is, so you investigate every weekend for 3 months straight, and in the middle of that, you all of a sudden start having activity. Can you ever really know where that entity or spirit came from that followed you? And then the second question is, what do you do if you believe something has come home with you or something is there and it's your family? Do you investigate? Do you not? I mean, because I think that's a really, really important question because we all are confronted with it. And I think the short answer might be no, right? But the investigator in you, it's a struggle because we're all still investigators and we all still want to understand. Go ahead, Gary.
I think it's also important at locations you go to is for some of us at different times we interact with, let's just say, an entity on a more emotional, deeper level than others. Dave, could be the child and that. And for me, the way I kind of describe it, because I am the odd person out here, I always say it feels like when you hit that certain point that I always describe it as you get a piece of that person and they get a piece of you with these intense interactions or feelings. And I call it like a file system. They've got a piece of you, got a piece of them. It's easy to tap back into that. Then when things start happening at home that are like what's happening at locations, yeah, I do think you can, not 100%, but I do think you can get a feel for who might be or who might just, again, it's a whole different. But for family, this room I'm in right now used to be my daughter's room, and she would wake up screaming, saying there would be a black shadow walk across her room. things, same thing like you, Dave, things happening around the house, my husband seeing things being thrown and all that. My daughter was terrified. She actually left. She still will not stay in this room. She doesn't want my grandkids staying in this room. It freaks her out. My oldest son is, he actually died when he was 2, and I got him back by miracle. And he's very touchy about this subject. He wants nothing to do with it. So since he was little, he wants nothing to do with this. My youngest was for it, but I did make the promise years ago that I would not investigate, because the family thinks that, and they still do think, that I bring things along with me, or I have things with me. And so, no, I want to, but no, I was going to recently, but just as 2 days ago, my daughter said, please don't. So, because it scares her to death. And they just got a house, so she's afraid I'm going to take something to her house.
Well, and we're kind of,
you got to be respectful of your family. And at that point, your priority is to protect them, whether you feel like it's not something that needs to be protected, but that is your job.
Well, and I do need to, yeah, because this is, it's a really interesting question. It's a tough question. But I think where I would struggle with it, guys, is, say my family didn't want me investigating, but the activity just kept continuing and continuing and continuing. At some point, don't you have to do something? I mean, as in Carrie's case, a mother, and in Dave's case, a dad. When is there a point that it gets so much that you feel you have to do something? And because you guys are relying also on your vast experience of investigating. We've encountered all kinds of things investigating. And at some point, because I know both of you trust your instincts and trust your senses and trust what you're feeling and but so the family is a line, and which it should be, and I get that. But can the activity, if it keeps happening, is there a line for you guys? Or, and I'll let Dave go first. Go ahead, Dave.
You got to post Curry too.
Oh, I did.
This big one.
Oh,
I've had that one too, Curry.
Yeah, thanks. I meant to.
Yeah, we've heard that.
I meant to thank the people that are posting chats, and thanks, Curry. If I miss your chat, I apologize. I try to keep up on the chats and post them out here so everybody can read them and see them. But thank you, Curry. And yes, I think we've all, I've had similar, but with cats. So instead of dogs. Okay, Dave, your turn. Go ahead.
Well, I think your home's, it's supposed to be like a base camp, safe, neutral. I've only really ever investigated, and because you've been involved in that. If my family, while we've been moving houses, and my family's moved and left that property, then we've investigated it. As you know, we've had some crazy investigations across in Utah based upon that. What I used to do, it was more of a stealth investigation. I would place audio. So, for example, if we went out for the day, I would place cameras and audio in different locations. So I would be the one who would lock up. I would go back and just quickly set everything up while they were all waiting in the car. I can't help it, Cordell. It's the investigator in me. We want to know what this phenomenon is, and therefore, any opportunity I get, I want to try to record or gather data. So, yes, I have done a number of stealth investigations in the houses I've lived in, but more so when the families moved out. And it was really because of the family's request not to do it. They didn't want to know. They didn't want to hear anything recorded. They didn't want to see any footage recorded. They just wanted to to avoid that. But the last house we were in, the last two houses we were in, I know you were involved in the investigations there. There was definitely activity in that, whatever that was. So, yeah, I can't help it. Correlates the investigator in me. Just can't help it.
Well, no, and I hope both of you understand why I asked the question, because it goes to the whole basic principle of this, is that if we do or can bring something home, and it, because there's varying degrees, like the stories I told you guys, I've had activity, but very little. I mean, and it's always gone away. It's just stopped. And so I never was confronted with the question in my mind, what do I do? It's affecting my family's upset. They've experienced stuff, my husband, wife, whatever. And what do you do though? Because I've not been confronted with that personally. But I want Carrie to speak on this too. So Carrie, you go, and then Dave. Trying to keep it balanced here.
For me, this was a normal thing. It didn't matter where I lived. Things would happen and I would go through things. And so my family kind of grew up with it without a choice. And it did scare them. It really did. As they've gotten older and they've moved out, and that I'm now addressed with, I have grandchildren that come over. So it has been requested that I don't with the grandkids here, because it scares the parents, and that because they know wherever I go, there's always something there. There's always something that follows or comes. The standard is they all believe I bring it to their homes or wherever. So, I'm a parent and Oma first and foremost. I have to respect those, because it's to the point where they won't bring the kids over if I start doing it, because it scares them. And what they don't understand is, this. Now, my husband and all that's like, do it, put some audio and stuff out. There's no one around. So I have done that, but I can't let anybody know I've done that. I have caught things and stuff, but if like my daughter, who's really freaked out by, I guess, what comes with me, as she says, I got to be respectful of that and my grandchildren. So I'm a parent and Oma first, forever a paranormal investigator, but my family's got to come first when it comes to that.
Thank you, Carrie. No, I totally respect that. And the reason I touched on this is, for those that have experienced this and you're an investigator, ultimately at some point you'll probably be confronted with these questions and concerns. And
it's common.
Well, and I think, guys, what you've summed up really quickly is, it's not easy. It's not a black and white issue. And
sorry.
Whoa.
For my family, it's common. It's known. No matter where I go, it's happening. It happens. People that are around me will start experiencing it, and that, and so it's just where it just was something that was growing up, and something that was. But when the kids got old enough and start understanding and experiencing things, then that's where I have to kind of step back from that. But it's still there. It doesn't change.
Well, it sounds like, guys, this decision is really just a unique and a personal decision. And it's based on dozens of variables and factors. But I wanted to add, before we go further, just for everybody out in YouTube land here, is that we are definitely have a consensus that we think things can attach themselves or follow you home. However that happens, there's still a lot of questions, though, that we don't have answers to. And so to expand this, and thanks for talking about the families and stuff, because I think it's such a vital question because so many people experience this. And I want those that are paranormal investigators, if you haven't experienced this, it doesn't mean you will. I want to make that
Doesn't
clear.
mean it's bad.
Well, yeah, I want to make it clear that it's inevitable. It isn't. I've been doing this for many, many years, and like I said, I have maybe 3 or 4 stories, and they lasted a very, very small amount, and I didn't do anything, and nothing ever happened, and it just went away. And we have people on our team that nothing's ever happened. So I don't. I guess maybe that's a question to you
It
too.
just becomes
Too.
the norm. It is just the
Well,
norm.
well, let me ask you guys this question then. Do you think, how common do you think this occurrence is? Dave, you go first.
I don't know, Cordell. It gets back to that, and I know we've discussed it. Phantom hitchhikers. If something can attach itself to a car or a bike or jump in the car or something, then yeah, absolutely something could follow you home. It just depends what your view is of what this is. And I know we've discussed residual, we've discussed time shift, we've discussed all sorts of things, but this sounds like intelligence. It sounds like there's a deliberate attempt to follow.
Well, but again, how common do you think this is? Do you think this is a common event or not? Then I'm going to ask Carrie the same question, because what you said is something we'll get into here in a minute. But go
I
ahead.
can't comment on others. I just know that for myself, it seems fairly common, but it always has. And I had just assumed that other paranormal investigators or people who are kind of involved in this hobby or this subject would witness something at some time. Because I think another question then is, we have identified that these things seem to be everywhere. We could have a brand new property, and it doesn't seem to be associated with death. That's what I'm saying. If you could have a brand new property, no one has ever set foot in it. You could be the first tenant, and you start having activity in there.
Okay.
We've had that a number of times. So therefore, what could it be?
Okay, well, let me ask Carrie that same question. And that is, Carrie, do you think this is a common occurrence? And I'll add to it within the paranormal um, sphere of influence, investigating and everything. Do you think this is common?
I gotta agree with Dave. I can't speak for others, but for me, it was common. It still is
Okay.
common. It was just a day-to-day, daily thing. To me, it would be, for me not to have it would feel unnormal. Something would be off if I didn't have these things or these people, but like I said, mine go into it deeper. But I'm always open wherever we go. I'm always open and say, I'm open. You can. I'm still waiting for that almighty entering someone, becoming somebody or whatever. But I'm always like, I'm open. You can come home with me. I don't care. But I go different places and I will report or experience things that have been reported by others, or like I said, people who live there have died that I know nothing about. So for me, it's common, and I think you can bring home, but I think a lot of it's just there too.
Okay. So here's my next question to both of you. And we'll go with Dave and then Carrie. So if things can follow you home, however that is, right? We're not gonna, I don't know if, because I have no idea how it happens or how they travel
Yeah.
with you or if they attach themselves to you physically. I have no
You
idea.
bring them in subconsciously.
Well, we can, or whether you think of them and they're just there instantaneously. There's so many variables here. So, but here's my next question to you guys, and because what you're saying is you believe that it's common for some people, Me, it's not common. If so, for my answer is for myself, it's not common. For me, it has happened, but very little. So, if they can follow you home, what stops? We have Cindy out here that's a single mother living at home. She works 2 or 3 jobs, whatever. One of them's in this old, dilapidated building. The rumors are it's haunted. What keeps something from following her home? And so, my question, what I'm trying to get at is this really unique to investigating the paranormal? Or do you think this could be happening all the time with the non paranormal investigator, the average person, just by association? Can this happen? What's your thoughts on that, Dave? Go ahead.
I think it's, if you look, so as an investigator, you are investigating, and possibly there's a bias there. You want something to happen. So whether you see patterns which aren't really there, and you kind of chalk it up to paranormal activity at home, right? It might not be happening. It might just be this desire and this want to have something occurring. On the other hand, it may be because you are a paranormal investigator, and we've had a lot of sightings. We've been doing this for a lot of years. Is there a perception therefore then? So do you see patterns in things? For example, if I put some keys in a vase or something, and I come down in the morning and I throw it across the other side of the room, I would keep that in my mind. I would say, okay, I'm just going to make a quick note of that. May not mean anything, but other people would just pick up the keys and not really think anything of it. And I just wonder if it is just that. I think it's twofold, Cordell, right? I think we either want things to happen so much that we see patterns in things which aren't really there, or it's because we see patterns in things, which is why we notice this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Carrie, go ahead. Your turn.
I don't even know what the question was now.
The question is, well, okay. The question was, since we all agree that they can follow us home or come home with us based on
It
circumstances.
keeps them from attaching to somebody else.
So if that's true, then why do you think this could be happening all the time with non-paranormal investigators? Because if we go to a haunted location and something follows us home, what stops Cindy? What prevents something coming home with Cindy, who works at an old dilapidated building that is haunted? Do you think then this happens to everybody? We just happen to notice it, or what's your thoughts on that?
I don't think it happens to everybody, but I do believe it happens to people. Growing up, I wasn't a paranormal investigator. I didn't even know what the word paranormal meant. It was until I was a teenager. It was a common things happening, and that were just common. It was part of life. So, but I can say as an adult and as a paranormal investigator, example, I go to my in-laws' house who just moved in 3 years ago, and as soon as I come over, things start happening, literally things being thrown off the table, to me reporting or saying who's there, and then it's a dead relative I never knew, or it's something like that. And then I leave and things are still happening, and then it goes away after a while, but when I come back, it picks back up. So for me, it was just a common occurrence. You didn't think twice about it. It was. Those who didn't go through this were the weird ones. But I think it falls on the individual on how they perceive things and how the emotions and all that go into it. It's just not black and white. It's not like, oh, I see them, I'm going home with them. It goes way deeper than that. So I guess I'm not giving you any better of an answer.
No. They're all good answers. There's no wrong answer.
No, and that's the thing. There's no wrong. Can you go, scientifically prove a lot of this? No, but, when you're accurate on a lot and when you're giving messages and stuff like that you have no idea about, and family members start seeing the person that you're one of the few people that you're constantly in contact with, and it's just a common occurrence for
Okay.
others. It's just, well, real quick, it's like going into an investigation. Some of us go in and we just feel things. It's just like you feel it, you hear it, it's just this feeling, and others next to you be like, I don't feel anything. I don't get anything, So it's the same.
Well, yeah, no, you guys answered that great. There's no wrong answer, right? I mean, we're constantly discussing these and the possibilities and et cetera, et cetera. Now, for me, I tend to lean, for me to answer the same question, that's what I'm going to do here. For me, I tend to lean that there seems to be, if you connect emotionally with an entity, then there's a higher probability of them following you wherever that may be. I think it's based on some form of connection, because I agree also, Dave, with what you said, that they appear to be everywhere. We can investigate a brand new house nobody's ever even lived in, and we'll find something. Now
Yeah.
that's for another whole show, right? What the whole concepts of that. So I think, and so I guess I'm leaning to what Carrie said. I think there has to be emotional connection, and I want to lead into this next
Can I say
thing.
one thing real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a key. It is true. I think just like us, if we feel safe with someone, then we're willing to go with that person. We're willing to communicate with that person. And I think it's the same. I think if an entity is feeling safe with us, then I tend to believe you can have more and whatever. So, I mean, it's really no different than us feeling safe, or because they're just still humans that have passed on, but it is there's a deep emotional bond
Connection.
between, connection.
Anyway, I want to point out Curry's thank you, Carrie. I want to point out Curry's chat. And we've talked about that before. I think some people are like um, you know, lighthouses in the darkness. And I think some people naturally attract, from my experience. Now, this leads into an interesting question about things following you home, because all the stories out in the paranormal world are usually one of two things. Um, Nothing horrible. I had all this activity, didn't really threaten anybody, but all this stuff happened. Then you had all the stories of demons and evil, and they felt threatened, they had to move out of the house, they had to do et cetera, et cetera. Horrible things happened, people got hurt. Tons of stories out there. That seems to be. So here's my lead in, that's my lead into this next question, that I think there is a difference. And Dave, I'm going to use your story you already brought up at the EH. You brought it up about the little girl. I think it's interesting because I think there's some clues here, guys. So Dave, for a long time, and Carrie also experienced it, but there was what appeared to be a little girl. Dave saw her multiple times, more than once, always on top of the stairs. You saw her rushing by or standing there for a second or looking down. I never once saw this girl, ever. I never heard her voice with my own ears. Several other investigators never did either. I think, to me, and now, like I said, Carrie, I know, did, but I think that lends some credence to the fact that there's some emotional connection that occurs whether it's on their side or even our side, both sides, emotionally somehow, because you did feel connected to this little girl, Dave, whether it whatever occurred on that. So my question to both of you is, if there's no emotional connection, can something still follow you home, and do you think it requires that connection emotionally for something to follow you home or wanting to be with you 24/7? I know that's kind of a big
Yeah.
question, but go ahead. And Robert and me.
Yeah, I mean, any time I go to an investigation when I'm leaving, I just give them Bob's name and address. So if you want to visit anyone, just visit Bob.
I go one step further. I actually take out my phone, get Google Maps, actually show them with Google Maps where Bob lives. So anyway, go ahead, Dave.
Cordell, I honestly don't know. I've never had an emotional tie with anything in an investigation that I'm aware of, anyway. I I mean, it could be that subconscious fatherhood thing. I've got a daughter. You don't want some little girl to be trapped in a place. Whether it's a subconscious thing, I don't know.
Sorry.
What's that, Gary?
I disagree, Dave. I think you did have emotional with the child.
Right. I knew we used to see her a lot, peeping her head around the top of the stairs, and then that episode in the shower. Actually, that sounds that sounds a bit bizarre, but that sounds a bit terrible. But the shower in that room, when I think you saw someone rush in, and I had the camera.
To you.
And sorry, did Cordell have the
camera? You
had the camera, and I pulled that shower curtain back because you could hear something inside the shower curtain. It's just like any horror film, where you expect someone to come out with a knife. And I pulled that shower curtain back, and something just ran out and brushed against my legs and away. I just thought it was a dog. I thought a large dog had.
It went between us, and it came out. And Cordell in the hall said, I think he said he felt it too. It was just a big intense.
Yeah, well, I think Cordell had ran. He was outside by then, because that's the first thing he normally does. Oh, he's not here. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I've probably had more sightings when I have least been expecting it. When I came home from work once and there was something sitting in the armchair next to the fire, watching a TV that was switched off.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I expected, and on a number of sightings at home or in places I've lived, the last thing on my mind, it's kind of going upstairs, you open the door and you see something. That's the last thing you'd expect to see if you aren't thinking about it. But for some reason, you seem to see more, I think, when you aren't expecting it than when you are. Whether that's something to do with the defenses or something, I don't know.
No, I agree with that. We do have to say we all believe that with the little girl that you did have an emotion.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. We just felt that there was, and it was because you had a little girl and all that. I felt too, but as a parent, I think.
So, I wonder how much this does play on your expectations. I wonder how much bias you do put into this. It's
you got to go in with an empty mind, and that's what I always say. I know people think other things of me, but I go in with an empty mind. It's every investigation's a new investigation, and what happens. I'm not going to hide anything anymore. It's just how it is. But if you think about what you're talking about, connecting with someone, there again, if you go up and you meet someone and you don't connect with them, you instantly, like, I don't like this person, I want nothing to do with this person, you turn your back on them. But if you have a nice greeting or something like that, then you've connected, then possibility. So I think it's the same again with the entities. If in their side, if they don't like you or don't have a connection with you, then you're not going to get it. It's going to move on to someone else who's going to give them that.
Real
You
quick,
know
with
what
what we hold on one second. With what Carrie just said, that brings up an interesting question. I'll make it quick. Is that why you think some investigators never experience much? Is because they never connect with anything? Go ahead, Dave. You wanted to say something.
No, I was going to say something that occurred in one of the houses we lived in, which kind of got me. It really got me to stop kind of pushing the home investigation route. Was I got a text, saying, "What the hell have you brought home?" From my wife, and my son was at home by himself. My wife had just popped to the shops, and my daughter was at school. I'm not sure why my son was. Was it I don't know what day it was. My wife was with my daughter. That's right, and my son was at home by himself. And he rang my wife on the phone and said, "You've got to come home." And my wife could hear someone screaming in pain in the background of the telephone call. And my son said that in the basement there was a man and a woman talking, and they were discussing. The man was saying, "It's my turn now. I want to do this," and the girl was saying, "No, no, I want to do this." And it sounded like someone was being tortured, and that was so loud that what my wife said to my son is, "Just run upstairs, go to your room, and lock the door," which he did. And I think from that point on, that's when I really decided to stop home investigating. And that doesn't answer that question, Cordell, but it's something I was thinking of earlier, which I just wanted to put down. I think it's okay when things are going okay, but when it starts to really scare your family, that's when you've got to call it a day, Sorry, but
Oh, no. These are kind of the stories. Like, I mean, we've heard a lot of these stories, and this is why I think this is an important topic, guys, because everybody that and okay, let me backtrack. One of the most common questions I get from people who find out I do paranormal investigating, it's in the top two. It's either number one or number two. It is, do you ever bring things home with you? I get asked that all the time, and it seems to be. I think it's in the top three questions, top two, probably because that's one of everybody's fears, right? They would love to do this. I've had people tell me, "I'd love to do that, but I'm afraid of bringing something home with me." And that's why I think this is a very important topic, not just an interesting topic. And I think if you want to do paranormal investigating, it's something you have to keep in mind. I think it's something you have to um, ask yourself: Are you willing to do this? And not only willing, but if it does happen to you, what are you going to do? And I think that's what's interesting, because you guys have you've encountered it all. You two have been through it all. You've pretty much seen it all. It's been really tough at times, and it's also been good at times. It hasn't always been a bad thing. And so so yeah, these are all the crux of it, I think. Now, what the question I ask is, Carrie brought it up, that do you think the emotional connection, let's assume that you have to get some type of connection with an entity at a location. I don't care if you go into Kmart. If Carrie goes into Kmart and there's three spirits in there, if she connects the one at the frozen food, uh, uh, will that person follow them home? And if so, is this why some investigators report like, oh, nothing ever happens to me? And other investigators, tons of things happen to them on an investigation. Do you think this could be part of it? That connection has to be established in some way. I'm going to let Carrie go first. Go
I
ahead, Carrie.
just wanted to say something going back before you started this. The thing is people are scared of the unknown. When something happens they don't know about it, it becomes an evil, scary thing. And the way they find out about these things is they watch it on the TV shows, or these so-called demonologists, psychic mediums that are saying everything's evil. So the unknown scares people, but it doesn't mean that it has to be something that is scary. And I think that's a lot of where people fall into the category of being scared. It can be just as pleasant or a normal event, but I think a lot of people do get scared, and from the lack of knowledge or reassurance out there, then it's automatically evil. Then I'll answer the other one.
Yeah, and so let me bring this up because Carrie mentioned something I actually always think about. So there's Curry's comment. I'm putting you in the spotlight, Curry. It's an interesting thing. Do you think so? Carrie and Dave, here's the new question: is do you think just politely saying "Don't follow me home. You're not welcome to follow me. You have to stay here," before and after an investigation, regardless of when they say it, do you think that works? That helps? Okay, well, we got Dave is shaking his head no and a big sigh, and Carrie shaking.
No. It's an interesting question. My mother used to always say, my mother used to always say that you have to apply a coat of protection. I was telling about some investigations, and she said, "Well, you do apply a coat of protection, don't you?" I said, "What's a coat of protection?" She says, "Anytime you leave, you have to say, 'Don't follow me. You can stay here.'" And it's like, well, I've never done that ever, So I don't know. It depends if it's, if you think that's, if it's something to do with the inside here, then maybe if you convince yourself that might work. I honestly don't know. That's a really tough question. I can't prove it. I actually used it once for a phantom hitchhiker, which I'll tell you about at some stage. But I told him more to F off and get out the car. But yeah, it's actually, I was just thinking, and I had forgot all about this. I actually saw a ghost of a woman in the Park City post office one morning. But I'll tell you about that. Yeah, it was, and that was the last thing I was thinking about. I was standing in the queue, and she was just standing, and I felt myself being stared at. And I looked across, and I thought, she was dressed in like a big dress, and she was like smiling and just staring, and it felt really uncomfortable. And so I thought, have I stolen her place or whatever? And she's just standing there, and I was going to ask if she needed to be in. And I looked at her, and I turned to the thingy, and I looked back, and she was just gone. Strange.
Okay. So this is a tough question, and I want to shout out to Curry. Thanks, Curry. I think this is an interesting discussion too, and hopefully anybody listening to this later will find it interesting, because if you're in this field long enough, you will always have this discussion, right? This is one of the major things people talk about, and we talk about all the time. So, Carrie, your turn with the question. You already shook your head, and if you don't believe the saying "Don't follow me home," do you think there's anything one can do to prevent it or minimize it happening?
Again, I think it comes down to the person, and You know, if you want to sit there and empower yourself saying you can't come home with me, you know, and it helps that person, then great, let them do it and support it. Um, you know, for me, even if I said something like that, it's not going to mean anything. And part of it's because I welcome it. I'm everywhere I go, I'm always like, yeah, you can come home with me, you know, no big deal. So, but if it gives the power to someone, I mean, it's like saying a prayer in a way. If you believe in prayers are going to protect you, then saying this is almost like a prayer that it's going to protect you. Um, can you put blinders up to things? Yeah. Doesn't mean you're not going to experience things. No, just like my husband, when he's there, he'll hear or see things, and he's like, it's because of her, you know, go to her, bug her or whatever. But or I'll go places, and it's like, what's going on?
It's Bob's comment, which is adding some levity.
I just couldn't shake him off.
Well, you know, we're laughing at Bob. We're laughing at your comment, but in a way, though, that actually is a interesting comment he made, because why do we think somebody we just met that is dead would actually do what we want them to do? Isn't that the problem with investigating in general, is trying to get enough data to get them to do something? And we're always asking them to do something, whether it's knock, talk to us, whatever.
Yeah.
Why would we think that telling them to stay, don't go anywhere, is actually going to work either?
Yeah.
That's the problem I have with it, guys. It's like, why? I mean, because no, hear me out here. That if I was dead and I was haunting Carrie or Dave, well, I'd probably haunt you both. Um, you know, and I was always leaving the toilet seat up or down based on who I was haunting at that moment. Either one of you telling me to stop doing it, why would I stop? I would know I'm getting at you, so I'd keep doing it because I know it was bugging you. I mean, so why do we think these things work? Any thoughts on that? We'll start with Dave. Any thoughts? Then we'll go to Carrie.
Well, I don't think that could work. I mean, but it gets back to a discussion we had last week before. You know, one of the beliefs was that in order to take control of your house back, you would just say, listen, this is my home, you aren't welcome. And there's a belief that it's like, oh, okay, you know, and then these things go away, whatever it is. And it's a similar thing. I mean, I don't think that we can tell them anything because we just don't know what this is, you know. That's my thoughts.
Okay, Carrie, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's just more like it's a normal interaction between two living people, you know. I think, you know, just because you meet someone, you're not saying, hey, come on home with me, or you meet them that you stay there. You're not following me. They probably want nothing to do with you. You know, it's just normal human interaction. If we're talking about spirits and that, I mean, they're not these critters or anything like that. So for me, it's just a normal. It's as if they are living at that moment and you're interacting with them. But saying don't come home with me, do I believe it will work? No, but do I feel like you can empower yourself and make yourself believe that it can work and things go on, but you put the blinders on? Yeah. I mean,
no, that's a good.
To each, you know, I've experienced people who they would start saying their prayers and saying don't come home with me, and it made them feel better. Do I think it actually works? No.
Okay, well, no, that's honest. And I myself, I haven't. I don't. I I think it could work if it may. I agree with both of you. I mean, it's something. If it makes you feel better, um, then that's what's important. If you at least get that out of it, then that's good, and you should
Yeah.
continue doing whatever you do. But I think there's, and you both brought up good points. I do want to just touch on what Carrie said. I think too many times, guys, we forget, if we assume these are dead humans, no different than us, other than not being physical, then Carrie's probably absolutely right, because too many times we treat them as a circus act, right? You see it all the time. You see it on the TV shows. You see it on that we're expecting them to perform for us. And it really bothers me sometimes
They
because,
don't have human emotions.
right. Well, and yeah, we're treating them like the pet poodle, in the fact that, oh, hey, speak to, knock 2 times, do this, do that. One, we're assuming they want to speak to us, they want to interact with us, which is assuming a lot, I think. And and it's funny because we've actually gotten EVPs with several investigators talking and asking questions, and then the response is crazy. So I think, how many times did they sit there laughing at us, going, these guys are nuts? Going, and one of them probably says to the other, well, which one are you going home with? And he said, none, none of them. They're all crazy. I'm not going home with any of them. And because you have to look at this, is that you have to treat them as human beings. And part of that is treat them as you would treat your best friend. Now, obviously, there would be some argument, and people might say, well, you're dealing with demons and all this stuff. And if it's evil, you can't do that. And I understand that. But anyway, that's my little diatribe on that part.
Well, not
Go ahead.
everywhere you go, not everything you come in contact with or experience is going to come home with you. I mean, it's not like, oh, I experienced this, got this, now this is stuck with me, it's coming home with me. Again, do I think there are certain ones from just the human traits that would want to, maybe because they like you, or I don't know, want to, then sure. Doesn't mean they're stuck at your house. No, they can leave anytime just as much as be there. I don't believe they get stuck in your home.
That's a very valid point.
They like your home, then it's a safe place. It's just, it is what it is.
Well, and that's a valid point, because if they got to your home, they can obviously leave your home. Now, Dave, you sound like you wanted to say something on this whole, I don't know if it was my little diatribe, or did you have some comment?
No, I think we've covered it. If these things are around all the time, and I know I'm starting to lean towards that thought that these things are everywhere, and activity can be everywhere, then maybe it's your perception, which is, are you more open to it, and therefore it seems like you've brought things home, but they're here all the time anyway. Because I've lived in a lot of houses, and all new builds, with the kind of owner records, and there's been a lot of activity. I mean, especially in that last house in Heber, we picked up a lot of activity in there, and that was brand new. So yeah, I don't know.
Carrie, what's your thoughts?
I had one or two that I would encounter. My husband finally saw the one of a little boy and a guy wearing a white t-shirt, and that wherever I lived, these two would be. It didn't matter if I was in England, Charleston, Ohio, here. They were just there. My husband actually saw them and thought somebody broke into the house. Started freaking out. And then just gone. I haven't seen him in years. So, you know, the one's perception and how comfortable one is with almost having a vulnerable state. Because, yeah, I'm not going to lie, you've seen me do weird things that I will disagree with on things, or in that you're almost vulnerable. But I think if, like my husband in the beginning was always pushing it off until he finally, things were happening towards him when I was around, that he's like, I can't deny this anymore, or whatever. So I'm just rambling on. The whole thing is we're talking about humans, people who have died, that just have that. They may not give a crap about us or like us just as much as we go in the places, and you can admit you've gone in places that you've experienced and you don't like them. You have been like, F you, I don't like you, you're not coming out, I don't want to, go away, I'm going to interact with somebody else. They're all human interaction, human traits, human emotions. It runs deeper, I think, for some than others.
Well, I just want to add too that I think this has been a great discussion, and I think it's interesting because maybe this will be for a different show, guys, but I've often wondered if you took us and you got rid of the physical, because our emotions are what guides us, and the emotions are the strongest things that we have. And if you got rid of the physical, where you were all just the emotions, be it bad, good, neutral, whatever, would they intensify? And I'm not asking you guys to answer that. And I'm wondering if the dead, their emotions are 4 or 5 times more intense and all engulfing for them because they don't have a physical presence. Everything is concentrated on the emotional side. Anyway, that's for another show. That's a teaser. We'll talk about that at some other point. So to kind of we've done good. It's an hour 17, so we have about 10 minutes here. I just kind of wanted to kind of wrap this up. Not that we could, nothing in the paranormal I feel we can ever wrap up in a nice package and a bow and make it all pretty. Go ahead, Carrie.
I just want to real quick tell you about my car incident. You had your hitchhiker.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I had something similar, and this kind of goes with the can they go home with you bit. We were at a house in Ogden, and it was a very old house, and the man who owned it went through 3 wives. All 3 died, but 2 disappeared. Rumor has it that they were buried in the basement and so forth. And the people that were living in there down in the basement had altars to almost every religion there was. And they said that there was this evil spirit down there. Once you cross a certain place, it was the Devil's Gate. So we started calling the house the Devil's Gate because they believed in the basement. Once you cross, there's, long story short, we're investigating and everything's fine. One time I got physically sick. Every time I go in, I just get so sick. And I can remember I had to leave, and I got in my car and I'm driving, and I just feel like I'm not alone. I get on I-15, and I just, for some reason, and this is years and years and years ago, I screamed, "Leave me alone, get out of my car." And right at that moment, I shit you not, I felt something reach over, my seatbelt came undone, it flew off, my car swerved over, and at that moment, I just started puking everywhere on the side of the road, and then it was gone. Was it because I said, "Leave me alone" or something? I don't know. When I went back, you could feel the same thing. Wasn't something evil or anything like that, but I think the weirdest thing was just feeling your seatbelt come undone on a 75 mile per hour highway. And then just getting sick. But I mean, back then, could that scare someone and think, oh, this so-called demon that they claim is there was attached to me? No. If it was anything, maybe a pissed off wife once out of there. But so it's easy to also take things and automatically tie an explanation to it instead of saying, I just don't know.
Well, and that's your last statement I find very interesting, because we as humans want things to be done up in a nice package with a bow, and we want to understand everything, and it bothers us when we don't have the answers, or because it makes us uncomfortable. It frightens some people, not because you don't have control if you don't have the answers, or you don't believe that, or if you don't understand why something's occurring. It's very uncomfortable, and we as humans in general don't like it. So, on that note, I'm going to give each of you a last commentary on this. I think I want to thank you guys. I think it's been an interesting discussion. Again, why do we always do this? It's a discussion we could go on for another probably 3 hours about, because the funny thing, guys, every time we have one of these discussions, it always, if you go through the natural discussion, it leads to 10 other pathways, right? 10 different takes and subjects and subject matter and everything. So um, part of what I tried to do is as to try, and you guys did really good focusing on this topic, and it's really hard because everything's so intertwined in the paranormal, right? All the topics are so interlaced, and they all really are together, and it's really difficult to just say, let's talk about this one little area of the paranormal, because everything's so interlaced. They're all connected. Anyway, so Dave, you'll be up first. What's your overall thought on this? And just summarize, and then I'll ask Carrie just to summarize. And remember, I mean, my view of this is, I think this is a hugely important question, because I think people in the paranormal, when you investigate, it's always in the back of your mind. Even if you don't believe it and believe that there is absolutely no such thing as an entity or spirits, you still have it in the back of your mind going, what if? What if? So, Dave, the floor is yours for a few minutes summary of this. Then, Carrie, you'll be up next.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, I have had a lot of activity in the houses I've lived in. I started investigating quite young, so could I link it to investigations or not? I don't know. It did happen probably more predominantly in the US, but that could have been linked to the US rather than the investigations. I think there is as investigators, you do want answers, you do want to learn and understand what this is. Could that therefore play as some sort of cognitive bias? Possibly. Could you see relationships where there's no relationships? Could you see patterns where there's not really patterns? So therefore, could you see things occurring at home when they might not be? For whatever reason, though, whether it's something that follows you home or whether the activity is always at your home because it's everywhere, that's what I'm probably more kind of more leaning towards. We have had evidence of a lot of activity in brand new places. I mean, is it something to do with the land? Is it something to do with the individual? I just don't know. But do you want us to tell the audience that hitchhiker story or not?
Well, go ahead real quick.
Yeah. Anyway, just for the record, about 6 months ago, so you're saying that, can things follow you home? Well, if things can attach to your vehicle, then maybe they can. I was driving, so I live in Scotland, and I drive to England for work. So it's about a 6-hour drive. I do that. I stay down there. Cheers, Curry. So I stay down there, and I come back, say, on a Friday night, and I go down on a kind of a Monday night, and it's the A1. It's a motorway. Speed limit 60 miles an hour, and I was driving a little bit over the speed limit, and I saw a police car. So I decided to slow slightly, and I was looking in the rear view mirror, This was 1 o'clock in the morning, deserted motorway. I mean, it's deserted. The kind of area is Northumberland in England, and it is absolutely deserted. And I didn't realize it, but the car had come to a stop. The car had just come to a stop. And when I looked through the passenger side window, there was a guy there, just standing so close to the car window, the car door, that I could only see his belt, his trousers, and his shirt, just as if it was pressed against that passenger side door. Now, the chances of stopping on a remote highway and having someone exactly next to the car would be pretty slim at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? But I honestly can't remember that car slowing down, but it came to an absolute stop at that location. And as soon as I looked at this thing, the hairs on the back of the neck went up, and you could feel the cold in the car. And as I pulled away, and I just basically said, "You can F off. You aren't coming with me, and you can get out the vehicle." And, so I think at the time I probably believed there was something there, but it was just an interesting experience, that if you are saying that these, is there intelligence there, and can these things attach to your vehicle or to you? You hear stories in the UK about kind of spirits kind of attaching to the back of bikes, motorcycles. You hear about them being picked up by cars and them going to some location where they point to and the house is not there, or they just disappear. You hear all these stories, and I think I probably saw a snapshot of one of that at 1 a.m. in the morning on that motorway. So anyway, that's my story.
All good. You any last thing you want to say on this, and then I'll turn it over to Carrie?
No,
the whole concept. No. Okay,
Carrie? I'm good, thanks.
Okay, Carrie, it's your turn to kind of summarize. It's a huge topic.
Yeah, it's.
Go ahead.
I think in this field that we don't want to be judged, so we put walls up and we'll agree with people or agree to disagree with people, even if you're going through something completely different. If it's the norm, people want to follow that norm because they don't want to be judged. And so, I can't answer for anybody else. I don't have the answers, and that's the key, is we don't have the answers. I do feel like, we interact with just human traits, individuals that, just like with living, you like, you don't like, you want to come visit your house, you don't, I think what really needs to be done, and you don't see it very often, is that the paranormal investigators not all have to go deep into what experiences, what they actually go through, so there's an honest look out there of what this is for people, because it's not the TV shows, it's not something comes home with you and it's gonna torture your family. Or so I mean this, and the reason I'm doing this because you're right, this topic dives into a bunch of topics, but I do think that we need to have a show where the walls are down and the honesty comes out with our experiences or what takes place, and then maybe others can say, yeah, I get that, but no, we don't have the answers. That's the whole thing. It's always going to be a question. It might mean different to people, but it's just a rambling. My brain's just running and it's not coming out right. So it's just a common thing. It's a human trait, nothing non-humans ever come home with me or have not interacted with anything that's not human. So
well, thank you. And I think this has been an interesting, like I said, I honestly do believe this is an important question to explore, and we might have to touch this again at some point. I do have one question for you, Dave, though. I call the story you told, I call him the hitchhiker. Was he wearing a kilt?
No.
Okay, just check. I just wanted to check.
He was wearing patchwork brown and black trousers. I don't know what that.
Kimberly.
Thank you, Kimberly. And
what's normal for one person doesn't mean it's normal for someone else. And you do go places when you investigate where you're like, you're not the normal one. You're people are saying you're not normal. Well, for me, there's investigators. I'm like, you're not going through this. You're not, so you're not the normal one. So it's a twofold.
yeah, and again, this is interesting, but I think, for me to sum this up is one, all three of us have experienced this to some extent, some other more than others. Let me be honest here. I've a lot less than Carrie and Dave, but it's an important topic. I think you guys did great on it. And for next week, guys, and I want to thank Kimberly. Also, Kimberly's a member in training with Pulse, new member. Thank you.
We'll have her on sometime too.
Yeah. We'll schedule something with you, Curry, if you're still listening, and we'll get you on here to talk about your show. I'm not sure what we're going to do next week, but I do want at some point to cover haunted objects. I want to do a show, Dave, on based on your story, not that a whole show based on your story of the what I call the Scottish hitchhiker, but the whole concept, because roadways, and it got me thinking the other day, guys, in the US and the UK and in Europe, all over the world, you have these haunted roads, right? There's all types of myths and stories about, the girl in the wedding dress, and all these people over the years pick her up and she says, I'm going XYZ, and they get a mile down the road and then they turn around and she's gone. Things like that. I think we need to do a whole show and maybe call it urban myths or something. I think there's some truth to a lot of these stories. Some I think are just that, urban myths. There's really no truth. And Dave, I think you might have encountered one, and this is your opportunity. So don't blow it, Dave, to actually create the myth and the urban legend of the Scottish hitchhiker. That's why I asked if he had a kilt on, because this is your opportunity to create. He had a kilt on, and it was windy, and it blew up, and right at my window there. That's how I knew it was a man. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can add to this.
Yeah, that's a different kind of car park, Cordell. That's different laybys you go for that kind of experience.
Am I talking about a truck stop? Oh, maybe I am.
But it's interesting, Cordell. Me and Bob, I know the exact location. Once this lockdown ends, I'm going to sacrifice Bob up there, and we are going to drive up and stay there just to see, see if there is anything that kind of occurs.
Thanks, Curry, for the shout out there. Cheers. I'll let Dave say cheers back to you, Curry.
Yeah, cheers, Curry. Thanks, bud. And thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and so to wrap this up, we'll decide later in the week, or probably 15 minutes before we go on air next Sunday, what we're going to talk about, as usual. I do want to do a more
planned discussion.
Well, no, I mean, I want to do haunted.
Splinter off into so many topics.
Yeah, and I think we need to do, though, at some point a discussion on the haunted objects, and then the other topic, which unfortunately gets lumped together, and that's cursed objects, because technically they're all in the paranormal, right? Because you have haunted objects, and contrary to popular belief, then you have cursed objects. They're not the same thing, and it just kind of irritates me that people keep lumping them together.
Possessed objects.
There you go. Yeah,
possessed objects. You'll become possessed.
And so we'll do that, and we'll announce it later this week, or this coming week, what we'll do. But I really want to thank Dave and Carrie for um, you guys did great as always. And a big shout out to all those watching this and those on the chat to give up part of your Sunday afternoon. Well, that's if you're in the US. And Bob, I guess, gave up part of his evening. But I really appreciate everybody participating. And I'm just going to go around the room and we'll say good night one at a time. And I'm going to say good afternoon first. So anyway, thank you guys. Please click like, subscribe to our channel. It helps us out with the YouTube's algorithms for people to find our channel. You have to have subscribers for people to find it. So it's a catch. Yeah, they go hand in hand. Wait a minute.
NDAs.
Consider near death. Well, that's an interesting topic. And maybe when we have you on, Curry, we'll discuss that, because I know Curry guys probably has about 20 different topics he could talk about after doing his broadcast and podcast for all these years. So anyway, I'm going to say goodnight, but thank you guys. Thank you, Curry, Kimberly, Bob. Appreciate it. Click the like button, and I'm going to say good afternoon. And thank you, Dave. It's great seeing you. Stay healthy.
Give the
Carrie,
family hugs.
what? Don't say goodbye yet.
No, I said give the family hugs.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we'll do. Thanks.
And Carrie, I want to say good afternoon to you, and we'll talk to you later. And Dave, we'll talk to you later. And I'm gonna leave and let you two say goodbye, starting with Dave or Carrie, whoever jumps in first, because I'm
Yeah, Carrie, you can go ahead.
Yeah, you just got to be honest in this field. We don't have answers, and that's plain and simple. We don't have answers. We can't take personal experiences and use it as evidence. My suggestion, though, is just be honest. Don't be afraid of judgment, and just seek the truth, and just build data from there. And hopefully one day we'll get closer, but we don't have answers. So at that, Dave, cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, Carrie. Oh, you've just gone off there. And thanks, everyone.